Rick Astley, a singer, songwriter, and pop icon, became a global sensation with his timeless hit, Never Gonna Give You Up.
Nothing was ever going to be Never Gonna Give You Up again, because that was just a freak.
When I interviewed him, I found him to be incredibly warm, genuine, and down to earth.
Bad records become hits, that's for sure. I might have had a few.
Rick and I dive into his incredible journey from his rapid rise to fame in the 80s to his new life as an internet sensation with Rick Rolling, loved by many teens worldwide.
Are you for real? Is this an actual thing? And he said, yeah.
He shares one of the most nerve-wracking moments of his career.
How was playing at Glastonbury?
It's a big deal. It really is a big deal, Glastonbury, I think. Oh, it's amazing.
We also talk about his tough beginnings.
Why do you think that your dad was so physically abusive?
I don't want to paint my dad as being this monster, because he wasn't a monster. He sadly just couldn't control himself.
And what he really thinks about Kylie Minogue.
This girl can sing, we're going to make a record with her, it's going to be a monster hit, and that's all they cared about. And I found that a bit baffling.
I'm Sarah Grynberg, and this is A Life of Greatness.
Rick Astley, we've just been bopping around to your songs before this interview, and they're absolute classics. But you start your memoir saying that you never wanted to write one, but you did. So tell us why, what changed?
There was a number of things. One of the biggest things actually was that my parents both passed away in the last few years. And I really felt that if you're going to do an autobiography, you need to be as honest and truthful as you can. Maybe that's not everyone's view, but it was certainly mine. And I also felt that my upbringing was quite unusual. And I actually think it definitely, I wouldn't say pushed might be a bit too strong a word to use, but it definitely sent me down a path of wanting to get away from where I'm from and the childhood that I was brought up in. And music was an amazing way to do that. So I kind of felt that when my parents both died, I'm the youngest of four kids, by the way.
Yeah.
When my parents both passed, I felt I can be as honest as I want to be about either of them, and they can't be upset by it. My childhood was a bit sticky at times and wasn't I kind of use the term picture postcard, childhood. It wasn't that at all. And obviously I'm the guy who sang Never Gonna Give You Up and Together Forever and what have you, so people perhaps might have a picture in the mind of what it might have been like. And I just wanted to be really honest about it. So that was one of the big triggers. The other thing is I'm 58 and I'm going to start forgetting most of this stuff.
So it's good that it's written it down. It's really interesting. Only recently I interviewed, we're talking like within this week, Darren Hayes from Savage Garden. He's just released a book.
Right.
And his upbringing is identical to yours. Actually,
Oh, really?
Unbelievable. It was like, because I had to read the two books side by side, and I thought, wow, this is so interesting in the sense that I wonder, we'll go into your childhood, but I wonder, why you think that music became such an important part of your life, considering quite a terrible upbringing that you had and the abuse that happened within your household.
Well, there's some very obvious reasons, and one is that we always had a piano in the house. My mum actually, much later on in life, earned her living from playing the piano. My mum and dad divorced when I was about 4, maybe 5. And my mum basically, I guess, had a bit of a breakdown. And I mean, I didn't know that at the time. I'm a kid, but that's looking back, that's kind of what happened. They'd had another son who was he died because of through meningitis, and that happened before I was even born and before the next eldest was even born, Mike, my older brother. And I think that just destroyed them, but they just carried on having more kids and trying to keep the family together and whatnot. But I think that was probably a major thing. I mean, listen, I can't even fathom it. I'm a dad, and I just can't even imagine that. And so, but my mum, there was always a piano in the house. My mum loved music. My dad sang. If he wasn't in a really dark, miserable mood, which he was quite a lot, he would be totally the opposite. And he'd be singing. He sang, a lot of the old great Frank Sinatra stuff and that kind of period of stuff that he loved. He didn't really like pop music, which is kind of ironic because his son became a pop star. And he didn't like accountants either because he had a little business. And Mike, the next eldest brother, became a chartered accountant. So there you go. But I think having two older brothers and an older sister as well was a massive part of why I grew to love music, not just in a passive way, kind of like, oh, that's nice, that's something I'm into. It kind of really meant an awful lot to me. My sister Jane, who's 10 years older than me, took me to my first concerts when I was about 10 years old. I'm on about rock gigs, like gigs where, you know, let's say a big venue in Manchester, for instance, which is the closest big town to us. She took me to see like a progressive rock band called Camel, which was an experience in itself because it's not pop tunes. This is like kind of like out there music. And I think it just turned me on to something that was an escape. I do have kind of memories of it. She took me to see Supertramp as well, by the way, which,
Oh, wow.
was a bit more conventional in the sense that like just amazing songs that the world knew. Camel was a bit more of an acquired taste, let's say. But in terms of being a 10-year-old and seeing that and hearing that, I kind of felt I'd like to escape into this, that I'd like to be there. And even being in school plays, the church choir, just stuff like that, even that was a little escape because you're getting attention. You could even say love, really, but it's not coming from your parents. It's not coming from your home. It's out there, and I don't think that's much of a bridge to to jump from
Mm.
going to gigs, being at school, doing things to going. I'd actually like to do this for real, and I think my dream was always that. I think certainly from my mid-teens onwards, I think I kind of thought this is something I'd like to do.
Why do you think that your dad was so physically abusive to you and your mother and your siblings?
I mean, to be honest, I do talk about this in the book, obviously, and that's why we're talking about it right now. He wasn't necessarily physical to us. I did witness him being very physical with my mum at one point,
Mm.
and that was when I was really young. I'm talking 3 years old. It's one of those memories that I know I've got. I know 100% I've got
Mm.
it, but it's so long ago that it's almost like I've painted a picture and just put it there now, rather than
Mm.
remember it in the same way that I actually saw it. I My dad was not a tyrant. He was not. He was abusive mentally and emotionally with us,
Mm.
definitely, because he couldn't control his temper. He couldn't control his moods. He couldn't control his outbreaks. But he didn't physically, hit us, beat us. He did that to me twice. Once I kind of deserved it, so I just forgot about that and thought, you know what, that's fair enough. And then the second time, I was much older. I was 17 at this point, and my dad had started various businesses. He never made a lot of money, but he always had some money and he always had cash. And and he'd started this little garden centre to be, anyway, it was like a field really at this point. And he sold the house that we lived in, which was kind of a normal house, kind of an okay house, to invest in this. And he was just under massive pressure, I think. And he just couldn't control himself, like I say. And one day he flipped out. He pushed me to the ground and he was about to kind of like steam into me, kind of thing. And my next eldest brother, Mike, who I've mentioned, the one who became the accountant, kind of walked out of the Portakabin that we actually lived on this site that became a garden centre. So this is some of the background of why my childhood was not conventional. And he walked out of there with a huge knife in his hand, like a bread knife, and put it to his throat and said, "I will end you if you even move an inch."
Mm.
And it's not easy to say that, and I'm not comfortable saying it exactly, but it's a part of my life, and it's one of the most significant parts of my life because we obviously left after that. My dad kind of backed down, and I kind of made it up with my dad even without talking about it. We just brushed it under the carpet, which for most people to hear is probably quite unusual, that you can brush under the carpet that your older brother puts a knife to your dad's throat. But I think it just, after everything that had gone on with my dad and all the moods and all the things that we'd seen with him, all the oddities with him, we just kind of like took it as, well, okay, that's the end of that chapter. And we went to go and live at my grand's house, which is where my mum lived. But I don't refer to it as my mum's house, and went to live with my mum.
Mm.
It's really, it's. I think that's kind of, again, it's an interesting thing that we did go and live with my mum. Of course we did, but it was at my grand's house really, and yeah, it was a. I think if I think in today's world he would have been diagnosed and probably would have received treatment whether he wanted it or not. And I think in going back then, those days, I'm talking a long time ago. I think the idea of therapy, the idea of even like let's call it more medical treatment, if you like, with drugs or whatever it would be, I just don't think was it wasn't something that many people considered. Or
Mm.
I've done quite a lot of therapy. I've been lucky to do it, I think, and it was about my childhood, but it was also the career I had and how that left me with a certain set of emotions and feelings that I didn't really understand and was hard to kind of work through. But I don't want to paint my dad as being this monster because he wasn't a monster. He sadly just couldn't control himself.
Mm.
And if anything, I have feelings of love for him than anything else. That's for
Mm.
sure. He just couldn't control himself. And as a teenager and almost like a grown man, if you like, that's easier to deal with. Even violence, like we kind of, my brother confronted him. But when you're small, you've got nothing to cling to. You are lost at sea at that point. And because the mum was not in the house, that female figure, that woman in the house kind of thing, to kind of balance that, it was a very scary place to be.
Were you upset that your mum left you with your dad?
I never was as a child, and I probably never really thought about it until I was in my 20s. I became a dad at 25, sorry, 26. And the reason I say that is because our daughter was born the day before my birthday, and I always kind of forget that I was 25 up to the moment she was kind of, and then all of a sudden she was born, and I'm 26. Anyway, it never really crossed my mind to think that because my dad kind of threw her out, but that she didn't, for instance, say, well, I'm going to take the kids one way or another. I'm going to make this happen. I think she was broken. I just think she was broken and had nothing left. And
Did you ever ask
I
her?
don't think she. Uh, n- I think I did actually. Yes, in my 20s, maybe even my 30s, and again through doing therapy and stuff. And I think her answer really was more along the lines of, it was your dad's house. It was his name on the paperwork. He owned it. I didn't really have a place to take you. I this, that, and the other. But the truth of it is, she probably could have gone to the local council and done something. I just don't think she could, and I don't think she could really just face up to the fact that she didn't do that. Maybe as well. My mum loved us. I know she did.
Mm.
I just don't think, like I say, losing a child and living with a guy who is extremely difficult to live with. But then I came full circle a little bit with my mum and realised that she was very detached. She was very. I kind of phrase it like she's behind a pane of glass in the book, actually, because it kind of felt a bit like that. It's like you kind of want to tap the glass and say, "Look, we're here. Why can't we?" And like I say, she loved us. I'm not after pity from anybody. My life has been amazing, I think. But I think one of the reasons that I got into music, which has been a huge, massive part of why my life has been amazing, is because of my childhood. And I'm kind of slightly fascinated when I read other people's autobiographies or their stories of how they ended up on a stage. Not just
Mm.
for music, for anything, I guess. But I don't think the drive is always, I want to make music. I think a lot of the drive is, I just got to get into another universe because I can't be in this one any longer.
Mm. It's also very inspiring for people to hear a story like yours because it gives them hope if they've had a hard upbringing to know that
Yeah.
success is possible. You can follow your dreams, even having
Mm.
trauma in your life. So it's, very, very inspiring.
Well, I would hope so, and if it does, I'd be, that'd be amazing. I think I do love autobiographies. I read them. I also listen to them a lot when I'm traveling, and I've definitely gained things, I think, from people's life stories, and they don't always have to be traumatic or negative, in the early days or whatever. It's not necessarily that. I just think the triggers for some people of why and how they ended up doing
Mm.
things is just really interesting. I do love music, I genuinely do. I have a studio at home, and if I'm home, I'm normally ending up in there at some point with a glass of wine, noodling around doing something. I just like it. Um, I've got friends who I just jam with at times and stuff. It's got nothing to do with my so-called career. It's like I just like doing it. And but I think it's different when you take it to a level of wanting to get in front of hundreds, if not thousands, of people and perform. That is a different thing, and I wonder what the trigger is for different people to do that.
Mm.
And I think some people don't even have a clue that they've got other triggers. They just think, oh, it's all about the music, and I'm like, is it? Is that all this is about? Because if it's just about music, you could do that anyway. You don't have to do it in front of people.
Mm.
And I've had those moments occasionally. I've spoken to my wife about it a bit, when I've kind of said, well, even when I've talked about, not doing it anymore and saying, look, maybe it's time. I'm 58 years old. At some point, it will be my moment to not do it anymore. We can't all be Paul McCartney, you know what I mean? So, thank God we've got Paul McCartney, but I can't be him. That's not, we can't all do that. And, but I kind of think, yeah, I think the triggers for wanting to do it and the emotion about doing it I just think are really interesting.
Mm. Explain to us what a Portakabin is, because that's what you grew up in. And I'd
Okay,
never seen that
yes.
word till I read your book.
No, well, I grew up in an actual house first, with 5 bedrooms and all the rest of it. It wasn't a big house, but it wasn't a small house. It was in a okay area in a little town that I'm from. It was very civilized. It was nice. It was like, I'm going to say the word normal. And then at about the age of 13, 14, my dad started this new project business, which was basically just a field, really. And he was going to turn it into a garden centre, so he needed somewhere to start the process from, and then kind of realised he needed money, and he thought, well, I'll just sell the house. And Jane, my eldest sibling, my sister, had left home at this point, and she's starting her own life. And he said, well, it's just me and the guys. We'll just go and live in a Portakabin. A Portakabin is one of those metal boxes you see on a building site where they have an office in it and sometimes store the tools and stuff like that. So we kind of slept like barracks, military barracks style, in 4 beds just in a row for the first couple of weeks of it. And as it happens, I wasn't at school at the time. It was summer holidays. It was like 7, 8 weeks of summer holidays. So it's kind of like an adventure. I'm a teenager. It's like, okay, we've got a tractor, we've got a forklift truck, we've got vans, we've got this, we've got that. Because he had a business before, not a garden centre, but something involving all that stuff. And it's just the guys. And it's kind of like, okay. And, we had like a proper shower block and everything, and it was clean, and it wasn't, horrendous, but it wasn't a house, and it was in the middle of a field that became a garden center. It's actually a huge garden center now. He sold it years ago. But I mean, the word trailer trash, whatever, I don't even think I'd even heard that name at that point. The point is, I'm a teenager going to school. So even if I'd just made it to 16 or 17 and left like high school, gravy, it would have been fine. But I wasn't. So it was pretty traumatic to go to school, because I'm sure it's the same world over. You get torn to pieces at school for anything, for like, doing your hair a certain way or wearing a certain kind of shirt. People will rip you to shreds for it. So you try living in a tin box. It wasn't great. But the opposite side to that, which was great, was that by about 14, 15, I'd started playing drums, and I got myself a little drum kit, a crappy little thing. And when we put the greenhouse there, the huge big greenhouse that we had, because obviously it's a garden centre, my dad said, yeah, you can put the drums at the back of there. You can't play them while we've got people in buying plants and stuff, but you can play it whenever you want at night, because it's just this huge field. So I used to go in there every night, and then 2 friends from school, we started a band, and we would just play. We would play, the Police, a bit of AC/DC, Joy Division, any covers, any songs that we liked. We just go in there like young guys and girls do, and learn them and murder them, and that's what we did. But I kind of think it was invaluable because I played drums every single day of my life, and not every kid, even who gets a drum kit, can do that, you know. And then when we got a gig at school, my dad said, "Well, you can't possibly, you can't go to school with that drum kit. It's like it's the biggest piece of crap I've ever seen." So he said, "Come on, I'm going to buy you a drum kit." So we went and bought like this super cool drum kit, and he was really generous like that. He'd forget your birthday, he'd forget to buy you something for Christmas, but he'd just randomly say, "Your bike's a mess," and I go, "Well, I know it is," and he'd go, "Come on." And we'd just go to the shop and he'd buy me a bike because he had cash. He had a little business, so we had a lot of cash, you know. And he was a generous guy. He was thoughtful. He was pretty warm as well, actually. He just, when he went dark, he went very dark, and he just couldn't stop it. He just couldn't stop it for anything. So, yeah.
In your book, you say that you noticed that when you sung that you would start getting attention. So how did that feel?
That's one of the weird and very interesting things about getting attention for singing, performing, doing something like that. That's a different kind of attention than what you'd get from your mum or your dad or your grandparents. You know what I mean? That's a random person out there hearing or seeing or whatever you do something, and you getting focus on you for it. And even at school and in the church choir and all the rest of it, that was quite a nice thing. I don't think I understood it or could even thought about it that much, but I was aware of it. So, for instance, when we did Joseph and his Technical Dreams coat at school, I played the Pharaoh part, which is basically Elvis. That's kind of, they took us to see it. I can't remember where, in Manchester probably, or Liverpool or what have you. We were only like 10 or whatever. I think we are in the last grade of that, that part of school life. And I'm like, so I've got to be that guy. And I kind of knew Elvis was, but not really. But I knew that I wasn't meant to be like everyone else in even that musical. He's the kind of like, dare I say, sexy kind of like, rock and roll guy. Do you know what I mean? I even
Yeah,
knew
yeah.
that. And so anyway, they somebody, I can't remember, made me this silver outfit to be the Pharaoh in and sing this song in this Elvis kind of mock style. And my sister saw it and said, "Okay, we're going for that." And she then sewed orange tassels under the arms as well. so
Wow.
so it was like, so, and one of the key things about it, and I do mention this in the book, because ever since I've always realized that's a moment, I think, somehow, I don't know how exactly, none of the other kids were given a microphone, and I was. So even though Joseph, who's the lead of Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, he just went to the front and sang his songs, right? And they gave me a microphone. And I remember that being the coolest thing in the world. I remember just thinking, this is what is going on. This is the coolest thing in the world. And I think, even going back to that, I think that kind of attention made me feel, I'll just say, better. It made me feel good. And I think, like I say, I think subconsciously and consciously, it sort of steered me towards wanting to perform, really. And even though I started off as the drummer and was very happy behind my drum kit, maybe singing the odd song, it was a pretty nice place to be on a stage. And I even say this to this day, I feel really safe on the stage because it's my stage and I get to say what happens on it. It's my set list. I get to decide the songs, and that's my place. And also, I'm louder than everyone else. Someone can heckle me if they want. I'm not going to hear it. And even if I do, I've got a whole PA to heckle them back with. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's a very safe
No,
space to
I
be, actually,
understand.
being on stage.
Yeah, I feel that about this studio. Like, I think this is my space, this is my home, and
Right.
whatever guest comes in here has come into my house, so this
Yeah.
is, so you got to be on your
Yeah.
best behavior when you come in, because this is like, it's so interesting. You become so comfortable, and that becomes like your environment. It's interesting, something you mentioned. It's made me think a bit about these snapshots in your life. You remember when you were 3 and your parents at home. You remember when you're on stage with the microphone. And, you know, I have the same things in my life too, like these little moments where I think, wow, they changed. That moment changed the trajectory of my life, or that moment
Yeah.
made me think something that made me now do something else. And I wonder, because you've obviously had such a, you know, wonderful life, you've experienced a lot more than, you know, most people.
Yeah.
What are those snapshots in your life that you can remember, those pinnacle moments?
I mean, from certainly from later life, you know, getting into music and having some success with it and stuff, there are certain things like the first record, Never Gonna Give You Up, that it went to #1 in the UK, and that is such a turning point. It's such a, in certain ways, and don't get me wrong, I wouldn't change anything. I genuinely wouldn't, because I'm very happy where I am, and I love what I've got in terms of my life and the people in it and everything. But it would have perhaps been easier if we'd had a number 18 and then a 9 and then a 3 and then a #1. But we didn't. We just went boom. And to put some flesh on the bones, I don't mean, I'm not bragging for me because I didn't even write it. It was the biggest record that year in the UK, and probably some other places, I'm going to guess. And I'm talking about when Michael Jackson used to put records out. I'm talking about when Madonna was like queen of everything. This is a sort of a golden time in pop, like they all are. Every decade's got a golden, you know. This is like when an artist like that released a record and the globe knew about it. Your gran knew about it, and your 5-year-old nephew knew about it. Everybody knew about it. Whereas now we have really big artists who can sell out arenas, you know, for 3 nights running, and half the people in your street have no idea who they are. They've
Oh,
got no
totally.
clue who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas back then, if you had a big hit record, it was a big hit record. It's like it's just boom, that's it, and it was everywhere. And so obviously that was just so game changing, in a music way and in a career way, if we want to call it that. But in terms of my thinking, maybe not immediately, but it felt immediately, if I'm being honest about it. It was such a big record, kind of straight away, that I knew, and I know this is crass to say it, but I knew I was going to make a lot of money. And because I'd been at Pete Waterman's studio a lot, I'd seen records, you know, literally being made. I'd made tea for people while they made them, you know what I mean? And then go off, be a big hit, and I'd hear Pete talking about sums of money and figures and things, and like, this deal's worth this, and if this happens, it'll be, you know, I knew I had some kind of clue that this was going to be a turning point in my life financially. And what that really meant was I'd never have to go home and live with my dad or at my grand's or anything from the age of 21, which is probably the case for a lot of people. But for me, it was kind of like I've kind of won the lottery. So I can choose now pretty much anything I want to do. I don't mean go out and buy Ferraris even. I'm talking about freedom. I'm talking about it's my choice. I'm free. I'm home, you know. And I know on the one I did have some feelings of like how amazing it was to have a hit record. Of course I do, and parts of the Fame thing were amazing and like, you know, really exciting. But the underlying undercurrent was I'm safe. I am safe. No one has to put a knife at anyone's throat. I am safe. You
Wow.
know?
I wonder how you went at 21 managing that fame and money.
Weirdly, again, I'll throw that back to my dad. Because my dad had always had a business, and so he was from a really big family, so was my mum, and all my dad's brothers and one of his sisters all had businesses. Like I'm talking small little, you know, like shops, post office, you know, painting and decorating, but you know, just little businesses. But they all knew what the taxman was. They all knew there was one, you know. My dad hated accountants. My brother Mike became an accountant. I became a pop star. He hated pop music. I think I just grew up knowing that, like, even if you make £100, 50 of it isn't going to be yours,
Yeah.
or whatever sum you want to throw at it, you know. And I think a lot of people who get in music, maybe not now because the world's a lot more educated than it was about everything. I think because of the internet and stuff. I think you know you see it, or you did used to see it an awful lot. A footballer, you know, the archetypal footballer, gets signed for millions, what have you, and then 5 years later he's bankrupt and he's being sued left, right, and centre. You know what I mean? It's kind of
Yes,
like,
it happens
I
in
just think
Australia a lot. Yeah.
yeah, and I just went into it knowing whatever money I make, half of it isn't mine. And yeah, that sounds super sensible, I know, but I'm grateful for that in a way because I saw my dad worry about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I saw him and he's probably his uncles chatting over a cup of tea or over a pint or what have you, and just sort of going, "Oh my God, I've got my tax bill coming on," you know. And I think it just went in, and I don't think a lot of people who get into pop music think that way. So, but I think the fame thing, there's no preparation for that. I don't think. And even if you've been around a few famous people, and I had by that point because I was at the Stock Aitken Waterman Studios. You know, I was been signed to make a record, but you know, they just got super busy, so I ended up making tea and helping out in the sessions and doing all those kind of things. You know, I did. I literally made tea for Bananarama, and Dead or Alive and various others. But again, it served as an apprenticeship in lots of ways. But I don't think you can learn from those people, even if they wanted to impart knowledge to you and say, well, this is what it's like, this is what it's really like to be famous. You have to experience that yourself. And my fame was very much overnight as well. And I think that's all. I mean, it is with a lot of people, but it wasn't gradual in any way, shape, or form. It's just from total obscurity to you're all over the newspapers and you're on the television every other night. In most countries that I went to be honest, not just the UK. So, yeah.
Was there ever that fear like, it's not going to last, it's not going to last?
Not for a while, no, if I'm honest, no. Because the guys who wrote that tune, you know, they were having hit after hit with loads of different people. And obviously, you know, Jason came, Kylie came, you know, they had hits with them. They had hits with people from, you know, bands that were already successful, but they also developed a lot of artists. But their records just flew. And they were kind of like hated and loved at the exact same time. You know, a lot of people really hated them, therefore hated me and various other artists. And a lot of people absolutely loved it. And so I think anybody who worked with them knew the chances were they were going to have a hit record because they didn't usually miss. You know, it was very rare that they did something and it didn't happen.
Wow.
So yeah, they had a real purple patch for quite a few years. So I guess the only time that starts to happen is like I left those guys and I wanted to do something else with, you know, music and just work in a different way in different studios as well and just go and experience things and go and record in America a bit and do stuff. So I made a record away from them and wasn't signed to them anymore. And everyone was a bit, I could tell, a little bit nervous about it because it was a slightly different thing. I'd got sick and tired of having my hair cut like every 4 days because we'd been on this massive tour where we had all this footage that I interacted with. Literally, it wasn't just behind me or anything. I actually walked into the footage, like the films that we'd made, and interacted with people in it. So basically, I had to look exactly the same all the time. So I used to get my hair cut like every 4 or 5 days, just, you know, and I got so bored of it that when that tour finished, it was in America actually, the last gigs were in Los Angeles, and I built this huge sign. I painted this huge sign, massive. It was like 10 foot by 8 foot, whatever, and it said "for sale" on it. And I dragged it out at during the last song and stuck it in front of the stage like that. And kind of something clicked in me that day, and I said, right, I'm not getting my hair cut for ages. I don't care why or what or whatever, because we're not working for a while, you know, and I don't have to go into this film again. And so I had really long hair when we put the record out as well, which was a bit mad, but a few people did it, I guess, in those days. It was the beginning of the 90s. And I think people were like, what is this, whatever. And we had a top 10 with the first song was called Cry for Help. And we had a top 10 in the UK and different countries, but also in America, which was, I'd already had quite a bit of success there, some number ones and stuff, and the albums did really well. So it was a bit of a knife edge moment of like, is this going to work or not? And boom, it did. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was, you know, nothing was ever going to be Never Gonna Give You Up Again, because that was just a freak. But it was a top 10, and that, I would have been happy with that for the rest of whatever. That was just amazing. And then the next three songs from that record didn't do anything, absolutely nothing. And I won't get into like a sort of get my violin out and feel sorry for myself and all this. It's music business, politics, things where somebody gets the sack who is running that part of the company, and the new person kind of gets rid of everybody and gets all the, and if you're in the middle of that with a record, it just dissolves. It literally just goes. Woof. My brother went out to shops in the little town and round towns round about us to buy the singles, and he kept calling me and saying, I can't find them, and I keep going into shops asking for it,
Wow.
and they say, oh, we haven't been serviced that record. And he's like, what do you mean you haven't been serviced that record? This is a guy who's had like 8 top 10 records throughout his career. He's never had anything other than a top 10, and you can't even. So I don't want that to sound like sour grapes, even though it is. It was just one of those things that taught me, oh yeah, this is a business, and if the business end of it isn't
Yeah.
working, you can have a bad record or a great record. You've got no idea what's going to happen with it. You know, bad records become hits. That's for sure. I might have had a few. And great records, you know, miss. They just don't even get to
Yeah.
see the light of day. So at this point, I was beginning to feel, okay, that was hard to swallow. I think if the first single had done nothing, everyone might, you've got a ballad with a choir on it and like real drums and like great players and like you've gone way too kind of down that road. We don't like that. We like the first stuff. If everyone would have gone, no, we don't like that, I would have, you know, packed myself up neatly in a package and just drifted off and gone, thanks very much for the good times. But that's not how it started. It started great. We sold over 1 million albums just from that one song, and it's like, we've done it. I've made a record that's completely different, away from those like hit producers, and some people seem to love it. And then it just kind of died a death. And you're like, okay. So it was harder to work out. Had I done something wrong? Is the rest of the record rubbish? And I don't think it's rubbish. It might not be amazing, but it's not rubbish. And it's like, it just taught me that it was just a, you know, this is a realization that yes, it's a music business, you know,
Mm.
and you can get things wrong. So
You know, it's interesting. I had mentioned that I was interviewing you, and of course, you know, my mum's excited, my friends are excited. But tell me, why is my 11-year-old son excited
haha,
that I'm interviewing you because he knows your song? So there's this thing called Rickroll. Can you
is
explain
there?
that to us? And why my 11-year-old son is one of your biggest fans?
Listen, if I could explain it, I would have explained it before. Now I can tell you, I can't actually explain it. I can tell people what it is. The first time I heard about Rick Rolling, a friend of mine who he's English, but he lives in America. He's a record producer, and this is, I don't know, 15 years ago or whatever it was. I don't know. We're on holiday in Italy, and he emailed me, and he sends me a link in the email. And this is early days of like going to YouTube 15 years ago. YouTube
Yeah.
was, you know, in its infancy and all the rest of it. So I click on this link thinking, okay, he sent me a video of something or what have you. And the video starts, I don't remember how it started, but let's say it's a sporting event. And like, oh, he's showing me the winning goal from whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, at the appropriate moment when the ball's going to go in the back of the net or whatever exciting moment it is, it flips to the beginning of Never Gonna Give You Up, the video. So I'm like, and Andrew's one of my closest friends, you know, we've hung out a lot together. We share the same sense of humor. We know each other really, really well. I'm like, what is this dude doing? Anyway, whatever. So I replied, what are you doing? He sent me another email. He did it again, but with a different intro, but then the same video, you know. And in the end, I just called him because I just thought I have no idea what he's doing and why he's doing this. And he said, I'm rickrolling you. I'm like, what do you mean you're rickrolling me? He said, I'm rickrolling you. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. But he lives in LA. He's in the music business. He's got his finger on the pulse kind of thing. And so he explained what it was to me. And I'm like, are you for real? Is this an actual thing? And he said, yeah, it's sort of becoming a thing. It's like, I get rickrolled every day, he said. And I'm like, and it's the same video every time. He said, yeah, that's the point of it. That's the joke, that it's the same video. It's like, it's the same thing. And I'm like, is that funny? And he's like, sort of like, well, kind of, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, so many years later, it's been kind of like adopted by the internet to some degree in so many different ways. And I can understand some people would freak out if that happened to them. And I think I've taken the other stance where I've sort of said, isn't that amazing that you've got kids who would have no clue about that song? How could they possibly, you know, unless they stumbled on grandma's, you know, CD collection in the attic? How could they ever? So I kind of treat it in that way, that it's been amazing because it gives me an opportunity to sort of play at certain festivals and things that I probably wouldn't get invited to if it was just like I had some old hits. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the sort of culmination of like this weird other life that song has had on the internet, you know, and so yeah, I very regularly. The weird thing is, I used to get a certain age group of female fan would want an autograph, and then that became a selfie, and then it was kind of like a bit more like mums who wanted a selfie, obviously, and then now I very often get like a 10-year-old kid coming over to me and they want a selfie. And the mum's looking in the distance going, who's that weird old man that my kid is having a photograph with? And then the kid goes back and the mum goes, what are you doing? And then she go, well, that's that dude. Do you know that dude who's the, and they go, oh, so then she will come over and have a selfie with me. Do you know what I mean? So it's, it's the gift that keeps giving, never going to give you up, to be honest. It just
It's
hasn't stopped.
amazing. It would have popped the song back in the charts, having all this kind of
I think
notoriety behind it.
well, I think what it's done is it's just put it in the consciousness of a lot of people, and whether they want it there or not, it's kind of there. So even though they might have remembered an old song from the 80s, they kind of don't have a lot of choice about it now, if you know what I mean. It's just part of the wallpaper. And okay, maybe it might not even be part of the wallpaper for the exact right reasons, like, you know, let's say mentioning Paul McCartney, let's say, you know, Yesterday or any other number of songs that he wrote, you know, a part of the wallpaper. Of course they are, but they're in a very different way than that song is. But I'm still part of the wallpaper. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of nice.
How was playing at Glastonbury?
Oh, it's amazing. It was such a weekend that it was crazy. We had a lot of friends and family there. I used to drop my daughter off at Glastonbury quite a bit, and my wife Lena would drop her off sometimes because she used to go quite often with her friends and stuff. But I never kind of went in and went to the festival. And just arriving there and the enormity of it, and kind of going, we went the day before that we played kind of thing, and I did some things with the BBC and what have you, and just, you know, shot some footage and different, you know, what it's like to be a newbie kind of thing, you know, in your mid 50s. And it was just great. We had a really great day the day before. And then it's obviously your day comes when you're going to play. And we were on super early with the first one on the pyramid stage. And I did get a bit nervous, if I'm honest. I do have nerves about gigs, but not in the way that was.
Why?
Because it's televised. Well, it's televised. It's a big deal. It really is a big deal, Glastonbury, I think. It it's hallowed ground, kind of literally, but it is hallowed ground, I think, as a performer. That weekend was quite a big one. Elton John was kind of doing his last British gig, maybe ever.
I feel like you've
That's a
said that
sentence to
before.
even.
I went to his last
Yeah, well,
tour
yeah,
like 5 years ago, and he's been back to Australia since.
yeah, but he's been on that tour for about 5 years, and I think he had to come back because of illnesses and different things. So, but I'm saying it as far as like, you know, we're really good friends with his guitar player, a guy called Davey Johnston, who is married to one of my wife's best friends, and so I think it meant a lot to us as well because his, you know, their kids were there and they were kind of with us, and our daughters kind of known them all their life and vice versa, and it was kind of a big deal that, like, also with Davey, you know, he's on there possibly playing that guitar and those songs for the last time, whether it is or not, whatever, that we'll put that aside for a second. In terms of that moment, that was quite a big deal. I think for us, you know, we talked about that just as much almost we talked about my own thing, to be honest. It was yeah, it was interesting that whole weekend. It was just full of highs. I did another set completely with a young band called Blossoms, who I've got to know over the past couple of years, and we've both got this mad love of the Smiths. And it's kind of crazy because they weren't even born when the Smiths made those records, but they love them possibly more than I do. And I'm a bit of a freak about it. So that was a gorgeous thing to do as well. Yeah, it was a really amazing weekend, and it was a bit baffling at times to have that many people singing the song back, because as we've just been talking about, there's young people in the audience. I mean, there are kids in the audience, but there's also people's grandmas are in the audience and everything in between. So yeah, I think yeah, it was pretty special, I think, that whole weekend.
How many people at Glastonbury?
I mean, Elton's was the biggest I think they've ever had. I think he got some ludicrous number of people in that field. I think it was the biggest one they've ever had. I don't know how many I got. I think somebody told me it was like in the 70, 80,000 mark,
Wow.
which is definitely, I can't think of anywhere else I've played that big. It's not just the size of the audience, and it's not just the kind of it's the box tick of it. There's a few gigs in the world and a few rooms that you go into. I've played the Albert Hall quite a few times, but every time I go in there, I just kind of stand there. There's a picture in the book with my wife and I just standing there on the stage, like in the afternoon, because it's like it's old and everybody has played there, and it's like, you know, you're in the dressing room and you're kind of thinking, who has been in this room? And I've been in dressing rooms actually with extremely famous people at the Albert Hall, you know, like the likes of Phil Collins, Peter Gabriel, you know, just, you know, people who kind of were always there, I think, you know, and certain venues do that. And I think Glastonbury, yeah, I never thought I'd be asked to do Glastonbury. I think that's the top and bottom of it. So to get that chance was pretty amazing. And that goes for some of the other festivals that we play. I don't really think I would ever have been seen as somebody who could even be entertained to go and play at a festival. And yet I get to play a bunch of them these days. It's amazing.
You know, when you're naming all these artists, I forget how many amazing music artists came from the UK. Like, it just is this beacon of like
Yeah.
amazing musicians. And in your book, you actually talk about one of Ozzy's loved characters, which is Kylie Minogue.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that before you met her, you didn't think so much of her. Why was
It
that?
wasn't her. It wasn't her personally. It was the fact that the guys who had signed me wanted to work with effectively an actress soap star,
Yes.
and I was like, hang on a minute, you're knocking out the park at the moment. You could step up your game. You could, you know, a lot of my favorite artists were like black American R&B soul singers, for want of a better way of putting it. And I was like, this is some of the greatest voices in the world. Why are you not maybe trying to aim, you know? And listen, I don't, there's nothing personal to Kylie or anyone who goes from acting to singing and vice versa or whatever, right? I'm simply saying I was a bit baffled by it. I was almost like, if I was one of those three guys making those records, I'd be looking for the biggest artist I could with the best voice I'd ever heard to go, right, that's who I want to make a record with. And they were like, they were taking it to the total, not even Kylie. Kylie can sing, obviously. She's had an amazing career, and kind of turned into like this, I don't know, like a national treasure. Obviously, obviously she's Australian, but you know what I mean. She's ours now, I'm afraid. And like, but there was that moment of going, so what are you doing? You're going to make a record, okay? Because looking back, it's easy to see that now, and it all makes perfect sense. But if they'd said, for instance, one of the soap stars in the UK, it was nothing to do with Kylie, it's nothing to do with the fact she came from Neighbours. It's like if they said, oh, you know, the guy who plays the plumber in Coronation Street, we're going to make a record with him. I'd be going, why? You're the most successful pop producers in Britain. Why? And I don't think they saw it like that. They just saw it as, yeah, this girl can sing. We're going to make a record with her. It's going to be a monster hit, and that's all they cared about.
Yeah.
And that I found that a bit baffling, because my route had always been trying to sort of like look towards greatness and go, well, how do we get that close? How do we get closer to that? You know. And I think I've always had that. You know. So that was my only thing about it. And to be honest, after meeting her, within about 10 seconds of meeting her, I kind of thought, yeah, you're just an idiot, because she's great, you know, and yeah, and obviously she's gone on and proved that many times over, you know. Yeah, so I have got, and I've said this many times publicly, I've got so much respect for her, because this business is a bitch, and it's a double bitch if you're a woman. And that's not a nice thing to say, but it's the absolute truth. And you can either be on the performer side of that or the business side of it. My wife manages me. She's been a film producer and, still produces stuff now. It's harder for women. It just is. I know we're in a world of equality and everything's great and everything's woke and all the rest of it. Yeah, okay. It's still harder for women. I'm sorry, it is.
Why do you think so?
I think because the music business it's been a male domain for decades, and I don't think there's some people who don't necessarily want to relinquish that. It's fading and it's going, but I think if you think back to the woman in question, we're talking about Kylie's career. It's a very long career, and I think she's probably had to fight at times to sort of say, I think I might know best what's best for me, and this is what I want to do. I'm not saying anyone hasn't helped her, because of course they have, but I'm saying you don't have careers like that unless you're in charge of it. I don't think, you can't just follow somebody into, you've got to dig it out for yourself. And like I say, I think that's harder. And I think also she's so visual, as most female artists are in pop music. It's a massive thing about beauty and appeal in that way rather than just the music. And obviously the fashion side of that as well. And I think guys get away with murder sometimes. A guy can be a kind of a rock and roll slob and still make it.
That's very true. You retired from your career quite early. It was 27, I think you were. What made you want to kind of stop around then?
I wasn't having the best time with the records, like I say. I mean, it wasn't like I was at the peak of my powers in terms of releasing records and stuff and, my popularity. I think we were on that edge of like, can we keep it going? And ironically, the one place it looked like we might be going to keep it going was America, funnily enough. That was like, oh, we might be liking this new thing. And I kind of started to develop a fear of flying, and I'd done an awful lot of flying. I was on planes every other day kind of thing, sometimes twice a day actually. But I just think having a daughter, or a child, I should say, and having my own home life and not actually experiencing it a lot, funnily enough. I had the things I was craving from my childhood, a nice home, my family kind of thing, and I wasn't actually there for a lot of it. And I kind of just, I don't know, I think I kind of came to realize afterwards that the flying, I still don't love it now, and I kind of avoid it if I can a bit. But I think that was, I just don't want to go where I'm going on this flight. I don't want to go there and promote a record. I'd rather be at home. I'd just rather be at home. And the music business, like I say, it's a bitch, man. It chews people up big time. And that might seem a bit much, to people who've gone through real trauma in their life and everything, to think, yeah, you were a pop star in the 80s, get over it. And I would agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly, but it does mess you up. It does kind of messes with your ego, messes with your self and self-worth, and, all the things that you attach to the nonsense side of the business, like the fame and the this, that, and the other, and the success to a degree. Music really should be about, did you love it? Do other people love it? That's what it should really be about. Does it move someone in whatever way, whether it makes them dance around the kitchen or weep, or does it make them, fall in love with somebody? That's what it should be about. But let's be honest, it's about making money. Once you've signed a record deal, it's about making money. That's it. It's a competition. That's why it's a chart. That's why it goes to number one. Everyone wants to be number one. Every record label is fiercely competing to do that. And that messes with you as a human being. You become a sausage coming out of a sausage factory, and, and you just become a product a little bit. And I don't know, I kind of looked at our daughter sometimes and I just thought, I don't really need to be doing what I'm doing. And I'd kind of like to experience this. And I was super, super, super lucky. I made quite a bit of money when I was really young. And I had an upbringing, like I say, where I knew what the tax man was. I knew how much of that money was mine. And I knew that I could say, well, I don't have to do this. And it's tough out there to try and compete and have another hit. It really is. And the process of trying to do with it, and sometimes it not working can make you feel really miserable.
Mm.
And then I ended up loathing myself at times, thinking, why are you so hung up on, having success and the fame and the this, that, and the other? What the hell is that? Why isn't the life you've got at home enough? And I kind of came full circle and realized that is what's important and that is enough. It's the other stuff that's the nonsense. But again, I was really lucky when I quit. Shortly after, my wife actually found a therapist, and she went on her own. I went on our own. We went together, and I think that definitely helped us in our relationship. And I'm not saying it was completely on the rocks, but it definitely had rocky patches. Of course it did. We're only human. Everyone does. And I think it kind of helped us massively to be together. But on what we're talking about, in my particular instance, it helped me, I think, square things away about what had happened to me in my childhood, but also in that 4 or 5 years of being a pop star.
Was it just talk therapy that you would do with was it a psychologist?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean,
And yeah.
yeah, I'm just saying, I think you have to be, and there's a luck in that to some degree. You have to find the one that suits you, I think,
Mm.
and the one that we were just really lucky, I think, and we found a woman that really pushed us. Um, and she'd let you talk for a little while, and then she'd say, "Great, you've got that off your chest. Now we're going in. Now we're going to really talk." And she just wouldn't stand for anything. And if you said something was, you explained something away, she'd just pull it apart gradually and say, "Really? Is this really what you know? Is this really what you think because of that?" And she pushed us quite hard actually, um, and I think it just made me realign and retune and what have you, my thinking on so many different things. Um, and I read a lot, obviously, about therapy and about trying to live for myself and live a better life. I think, and that might sound a bit grandiose, but I'd lived a nonsense life for 4 or 5 years. And even though it was amazing, and I'm still grateful for it, and I still love singing the old songs. Don't get me wrong; it's like it's a treat. It's like I don't know. It's a bizarre thing. It puts me in amazing. It puts me at Glastonbury. Do you know what I mean? It's amazing, but I also know that a lot of nonsense went with it. And you mentioned the age 27. There's a list, a very
Mm.
known list of very, very famous people who didn't make it past 27. And 27, 28, I think, has got quite a significance as well, because you're not a kid anymore. You know, you're supposed to have kind of maybe started to begin to find out who you are. And if you reach that point and you still don't know and you're still searching, and you start to use drugs, drink, whatever it is, as well, to try and find what it is, or escape from, so it's just a really complex thing, I think, that a lot of people go through with the fame thing, and it's very hard to unravel it, I think. And I was really lucky that I got professional help to do it.
Mm.
Under all of that, I would say I've just been really lucky, full stop. I really do think that. And I have got drive, I've even got some talent, whatever. All of that aside, you have to have some luck, and I've had probably more than my fair share, I think.
What do you do to take care of your mental health now?
Um, I read, I listen to podcasts. Actually, I actually genuinely do. There's a lot out there, as I'm sure you know, and in yourself, that you don't just. It's not like a froth thing. It's like, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to try and get into something. And I think I've gained something from that for sure. And like I say, certain books that friends or even family members will say, "Have you read this?" And it just. I think sometimes as well, whatever age you get to, I'm 58 now, and there's still a lot of emotions that still trigger me. But I'm sort of better at realizing that
Mm.
I'm being triggered by some chemicals inside my own body. Not always. Sometimes I'm just a complete and utter arse. But I can sometimes grab it before it's got me. And I sometimes even have a thing where I don't have a day job. I've never had a day job, so I'm extremely lucky that yes, we work quite long hours at times and strange, crazy hours, and we travel a lot and we all of that. But very often, if I'm busy, I don't really ever get depressed. I don't really get that dark when I'm busy because I'm too busy, and we're doing exciting, amazing things. So it's great. It's kind of when I'm home. And I've talked to my band and crew about this and lots of other friends who do what I do and all the rest of it. You come home and you get the blues a bit because it's been so exciting. You come home and you go, right, what now? And it's pretty easy sometimes to almost crave that chemical rush of like,
It's
we're doing
dopamine.
this.
Yeah.
Well,
I
yeah,
spoke
and
to a
it's
brain doctor on this podcast, and it was interesting because he said the exact thing. Because Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber, they're all his clients, and he said that you get this dopamine rush, and it's not just artists;
yeah,
it's anyone in a job that
yeah,
gives them a lot of praise. And because
yeah,
the dopamine comes out so fast, you get starved of it. So then you go into everyday life, like your normal day to day, and you don't have that rush of dopamine. So you
yeah,
have to try and drip feed the dopamine, which is hard.
right. Interesting. See, I do it with biscuits and watching old movies.
That's great.
Tea, biscuits, Spartacus. No, but I'm serious because I am one of those people who kind of rewatches old movies a lot. Not always old ones actually. I watch new movies again and again. I don't know what, I find something in them sometimes, and I just keep watching and going, I missed that. I think anyway. Doesn't matter. Well, the point being is, I think if I just have a cup of tea, a couple of biscuits, watch this film, by the time this is over, I won't feel like that
Yeah.
because my body will have kind of quit the chemicals or whatever. I have no medical training, obviously. I've got no idea. I kind of get the thing of what you've just spoke about with that guy, but it just works for me. I also do a lot of walking. I do a lot of walking first thing in the morning. I very often get out of bed and, I brush my teeth, I get clothes on, and I'm out the door. I'm literally out of the door. And Lena, my wife, she's more of a kind of, she needs a cup of tea before she leaves. And I'll just say, I'll meet you out there. I'll meet you for coffee in a bit. And we kind of like text where I've gone or whatever. Because if I get out first thing, my brain hasn't had chance to do anything negative. I'm in the fresh air and I'm out. It can be
Yes.
raining. It can be, our beautiful English weather. I'm straight out there and I'm walking. And we live not a million miles away from the River Thames, but sort of in the leafy suburbs of outer London. And I kind of just think, I don't know really. Before I know what I'm doing, I'm out in nature and I'm walking. And yeah, I might be listening to a podcast or a book or whatever, or even call friends and stuff. But I'm kind of like, I've got ahead of the day. And that way I've already set the day up, if you know what I mean. And I know sometimes when we are a bit stressed because, we've got a lot on or we're doing things or something's been troubling us or whatever, I'm kind of like, I wake up and I almost feel like the day's started without me. Like
Yes.
it's like I'm already in the quagmire. I haven't even opened my eyes and the day's already off. I'm already late. I forgot to do that thing yesterday, so I've got to squeeze that in before the thing I'm supposed to do. And da-da-da. It's life. It's what everyone goes through. But I'm saying I'm very lucky in the sense that when I'm home, I'm very often back from something which, yeah, has been amazing, like gigging and stuff. And that, like we said, has got its, roller coaster effect thing. But I think sometimes I kind of counteract that with really mundane, simple things, but they kind of work for me.
What's the best advice that you have ever been given?
I say this sort of jokingly, but it's kind of true. I can't even pinpoint who said it now. But they said, they said, get a good lawyer and get a good accountant. Honest to God, and I think at the
Very
time I was a bit
true.
like, yeah, whatever. I was a bit like, yeah, whatever. And I haven't had many legal things actually within my career. I've had one or two, but we've always had a good lawyer, if you know what I mean, at the background just in case. And I've had a few different accountants over the years, but the accountant's been our accountant for years now. We saw him this morning actually, and he's kind of a mate, really. Do you know what I mean? But I trust him implicitly and everything, and so I mean that's a bit. I wouldn't take that to heart, but I think it was like for me, it was like, oh right, okay, yeah. Again, it was like this is the music business, isn't it? You know what I mean? Um, I don't know. There's like a fairy tale thing to getting a record deal. It seems like it's something from a movie, you know.
Mm.
Um, but it's also you're kind of signing a business deal. That's what you're actually signing. It's not a deal to make music. It's a deal to make money from the music.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's weird, and I don't know whether that's spoken about enough. Sometimes I don't know. I don't
No, I
know. And
understand
listen,
what you
that's not to
mean.
say.
Yeah. It's like this
Mm,
fairy tale kind of idea of like bringing out music, but really, like, when you've been talking about it, I have actually thought about it differently. Like, wow, they're just
mm.
out to make money, which takes away the beauty of what you said music is. You know, makes you cry, makes you
Yeah,
dance around your
it
living
does.
room.
It does. But I would say, you know, we saw a lot of the guys from the record label last night, funnily enough, and I know they really love music, and I know they actually love their job, and they like being in the music business.
Mm.
It's not like it's full of people who are just, you know, sat there counting money in a, you know, I don't think it's that. It's just, and I think that's the other thing. I think when it's going really well, it's just going well. It's
Yeah.
great. It's whatever. I just think it's when it kind of turns and it's like, okay, how do we handle this then? All of a sudden, you know, that's why bands get dropped.
Yeah.
It's not like they're rubbish all of a sudden. They didn't turn into a rubbish band overnight. It's just, is it financially viable to really go to that next stage with them in their career? And it's like, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we've had the best years together. Let's just leave it.
Yeah.
Let's just drop them. And, you know, and it's like, hang on, that's humans. It's like, but that's just the way it works. It's like sport. It's like so unforgiving. It's unbelievable. And at least as music people, we can get to carry it on for ages. Our knees might have gone, but we can still go and sing. You know what I mean? And sport, oh my God, do I feel that sometimes when, and as I've got older, you know, and I'm now a lot older than all the guys that I support at Manchester United, you know, when I see the old guys from Man United talking, my era, if you like, when I was a lot younger and when I first got into watching them, I'm like, oh my God, you know, you've not done that for 30 years. You've not kicked a ball around in anger for 30 years. And that's just because your body just eventually failed you. And in music, you get away with it. All, you know,
Mm.
some people get away with it all their life because they can, the physicality of it, it doesn't bear the
Yes.
same scars. You know, it's like, you know,
And our final question, Rick, what is a life of greatness to you?
wow. I'd have to say, and it's a bit soppy this and everything, but it's your family and your friends.
Mm.
There is no greater greatness than that. There just isn't. Because I've had the other stuff. I can say it with proof. I've had the other stuff, and I would give all of that up for family and friends every day of the week. And I've had an amazing life, and I don't want to give that back. And I want to keep hold of it with what I do with music and stuff. But I am 100% convinced nobody's on their deathbed going, how many hits did I have?
Mm.
You know, you're on your deathbed and you're thinking like, you know, who did I love and who loved me?
Mm. Rick Astley, thank you for all the amazing music that you've put into the world. Your new autobiography, Never, is a must read. Thank you for the conversation today.
Thank you very much indeed. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.